Hey, how's it going? It's Phil Thatch, and I am in Ooltewah, Tennessee at a place called Cambridge Square. And I thought I would do a little vlogging test with my new Nikon Z camera. I'm really happy to have this camera and so thrilled that it has a fully articulating screen so I can see myself and see if I'm in the frame. Now, the trick of this whole thing is to not look at the screen all the time. I need to be looking at the lens and just glance over at the screen to make sure that I'm in the frame correctly, which is often a challenge for me. But I always liked the way my Z50 looked in video mode. I thought it had better picture quality than my regular vlogging camera, which is a Canon M50. But the Z50 does not have a flip screen like this. It has a downward facing screen, which, I mean, that's fine, but it's not too good if you're vlogging because you can't see yourself and you can't put yourself in the frame. My buddy David uses an ultra wide lens, so basically everything's in the frame, which is a really good idea, but I'm going to use the 16-50 kit lens. Okay, so let's talk about how I have the camera set up. I'm shooting in 4K, 30 frames per second. Some people like to do 25 to get a cinematic look, and some people like to do 60 frames a second to get a more realistic look. And so I kind of split the difference. I've always ran my YouTube channel in 30 frames per second, and you know it's kind of a happy medium between the 24 frames per second crowd and the 60 frames per second crowd. And nobody's complained about it, so I guess it must be okay. Now, the first clip that I made, the one that was just before this one, I had my exposure compensation set at plus 1/3 of a stop. And right now I have the exposure compensation set at 0. So I think 0 is okay. When I first started working, I thought that 0 looked a little bit dark, and now as I look in the screen, in the flip screen, it looks like it's okay. But so I don't know, your mileage may vary. Set your exposure compensation wherever you like. But again, I am shooting in aperture priority 16mm f3.5, which is wide open on this kit lens. And I'm letting the shutter speed fall where it may. And right now it's at 1/800th of a second, which could make fast movements in the screen look jerky. And if you're doing fast movements like that, then I would recommend that you put on a neutral density filter and use 1/60th of a second if you're doing 30 frames per second, and 1/50th if you're doing 24, and 1/125th if you're doing 60 frames per second. The thing I really like about this camera for vlogging is, you know, there's a few things. You can program the main picture taking shutter button to be the record button on this camera, which you cannot do on the Z50. You can on the Z6 and cameras like that, but I really like the ability to just reach up and press the biggest button on the camera and start recording. So that's really nice. The Z50 does face detect autofocus, which does fantastically in video mode, and you know, of course, in stills mode it does eye detect. This camera, the ZFC, which everybody says, oh, it's the exact same camera as the Z50. Well, this camera does eye detect in video mode, which really, you know, it's not that big a deal, because if you are doing face detect, it's going to be fine. I think for stills, eye detect is a big deal, but for video, it's not. But it is a fact that this camera currently has a autofocus point right on my eye instead of my whole face. So it probably looks relatively good. I'm walking around in the neighborhood now that's right behind Cambridge Square. Really pretty houses here. I bet they are quite expensive. And I'm still using aperture priority on this clip, and I still have my exposure compensation set at 0. So it is metering right where it thinks is correct. And it's hard to say because it's pretty sunny out, but it looks pretty good on the screen on the back of the camera. So they're doing a lot of construction in this new neighborhood, and fortunately, because of that construction, there is a porta potty, and we just got done eating at a restaurant right over there at Cambridge Square, and I needed to let some beer out. So here I am in the porta potty. Let's see how quickly this camera adjust to changing light as I exit the porta potty. Now that seemed like it handled that pretty quickly. Not too shabby at all. Pretty pleased with how it did that. So I guess you can be the judge of how things look in terms of focus and sharpness and color and all that kind of stuff as you watch this video. Like I say, it's hard for me to see right now as I'm looking on the back of the camera. The screen is nice. This flip screen on the Z50 is nice, especially for the price point that this camera's at, but you can't tell what's going on a bright day like this looking at the back of the camera like you will be able to watching it on your TV or your computer. So you can be the judge of how things look. Now, as far as audio is concerned, I am running the settings for audio that I'm using right now. I have it set to voice. I found that these Nikon cameras, if you set them to full range, they have way too much treble, and I'm not a real big fan of the way that sounds. I found that they sound a lot better if you set them to voice. And also, I'm using the attenuator, and I have the input level set to automatic, and I'm using the Rode Wireless Go version 1, and I have it set on its lowest of the 3 levels. So think about how this sounds right here, and when I get back to where my gear is, I think I might put the Rode VideoMicro on top of the camera instead of the wireless mic, and we'll see how that works for you here in just a moment. All right, so now I'm going to put this other microphone on. This is the Rode VideoMicro. All right, so now we are using the Rode VideoMicro mounted on top of the camera. Seems to be working pretty good. You can tell me what you think the sound is like compared to the Rode Wireless Go that we were using a moment ago. I'm talking at about the same level. I really prefer the wireless mic right here on my chest like this is. That way it can pick me up without talking loud. But a lot of folks like to mount a microphone on top of the camera, and it is nice. You don't have to worry about remembering to turn the microphone on and things like that. However, if you decide to switch and say, look, there are some green plants, now the microphone is turned away from you, and with that in mind, it doesn't pick you up as well because this is a directional microphone. And that's really the main reason that I switched from the Rode VideoMicro that I'm using now to a wireless mic, because it didn't matter which way I had the camera turned, it would still pick me up really well. So that's it for the test of the Rode VideoMicro on the ZFC. Okay, so now I have put the DX35 f1.8 lens on. This is an F-mount lens that I have adapted with the FTZ adapter, but I wanted to show you what the camera would look like at a small aperture like f1.8 that we're shooting at right now. So this is what it looks like with a little bit of Tony, as the camera conspiracies guy would say. All right, well, I decided that I tripoded up to show you the 35 1.8 because it's just too much lens. 35 millimeters on DX is too much lens to do any actual vlogging with. But now I'm using a tripod. It's just crazy. I've got the camera sticking way away from me so I can vlog with this thing, but you can see the shallow depth of field doing it this way. So the tricky part about vlogging like this, first of all, it looks ridiculous because I'm holding this camera 3 or 4 feet out in front of me. But the other part that's really crazy is there's absolutely no stabilization. This camera does not have in-body image stabilization, and this lens is not stabilized. But man, the shallow depth of field is pretty cool vlogging like this, I gotta tell you. I don't think I would ever actually do it this way unless I was like in the middle of the woods where nobody could see me. But right now I'm at a public square and everybody's looking at me like, man, that guy is a freaking moron. But that's okay, I'm used to that. All right, well, I have fallen in love with the way this setup looks using the 35 to vlog with the ZFC. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish the video while I still have this set up on. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy your ZFC if you get one. And if not, we've at least figured out today that it is a decent camera for vlogging. Let me see if I can get this fountain in the background when I say bye. Where'd you go, fountain? There it is. See you later from Cambridge Square in Ooltewah, Tennessee. Bye-bye. I would wave, but I have two hands holding this tripod. Bye-bye.